The first sensation was pain, a dull, throbbing ache behind his eyes that pulsed with every heartbeat. Aris Thorne opened his eyes to a canopy of unfamiliar leaves, dark green and leathery, filtering sunlight into fragmented patterns on the forest floor. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, disconnected, as if someone had poured lead into his veins. His last memory was the screech of metal, the blinding flash of the lab accident, the containment breach that should have killed him. Yet here he was, breathing air that smelled of damp earth and decay, not sterile chemicals. He pushed himself up on trembling elbows, his modern lab coat replaced by rough spun wool that chafed against his skin. The forest around him was ancient, with gnarled oaks and twisted pines that spoke of centuries rather than years. No city sounds, no hum of electricity, just the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a bird he couldn't identify. His scientific mind, trained to observe and categorize, immediately noted the anomalies. The flora resembled medieval European species, but with subtle mutations, brighter lichens, oddly shaped fungi clustering on fallen logs. His hands, once steady from pipetting precise microliters, now shook with weakness. He was a biophysicist, not a survivalist, and his body felt alarmingly frail. Then the screams cut through the silence, human, raw with terror. They came from somewhere to his left, beyond a thicket of brambles. Aris staggered to his feet, his legs buckling under him as he grabbed a nearby tree for support. The weakness was pervasive, a systemic fatigue that made every movement an effort. He forced himself forward, his mind already analyzing. The screams indicated acute distress, likely trauma or threat. The logical part of him urged caution, but years of emergency response protocols in the lab kicked in: assess, intervene, mitigate. He pushed through the underbrush, thorns tearing at his clothes, and emerged into a small clearing. The scene that unfolded was straight from a nightmare. A man in tattered peasant garb, linen tunic, leather boots caked with mud, was stumbling backward, his face pale with horror. Chasing him were three figures that defied rational explanation. They moved with a jerky, shambling gait, limbs stiff and uncoordinated, but their speed was deceptive, a relentless plod that closed distance with grim inevitability. Their skin was mottled gray, peeling in places to reveal dark, necrotic tissue beneath. Eyes, milky and vacant, stared ahead without recognition. One of them had a deep gash across its chest, oozing a viscous black fluid that dripped onto the forest floor, leaving sizzling marks on the moss. Zombies. The word surfaced from pop culture, but Aris dismissed it immediately. This was no movie. These were biological entities, their movements governed by some form of neural degradation. The peasant, a middle-aged man with a scraggly beard and calloused hands, tripped over a root, falling hard onto his back. The zombies closed in, their mouths hanging open, revealing teeth stained with that same black fluid. Aris's heart hammered against his ribs, but his training overrode the panic. Observe. Analyze. He focused on the nearest zombie, and that's when the world shifted. Glowing lines of light erupted around the creatures, not physical but superimposed on his vision like augmented reality overlays. They shimmered with a pale blue hue, intricate networks that pulsed with data streams. Aris blinked, but the images remained, a complex web connecting the zombies to each other and to something deeper, a central node he couldn't see. Text scrolled in his peripheral vision, not in any language he knew but as pure information: transmission vector, salivary droplets. Concentration, high. Propagation rate, 0.3 meters per second, host integrity, 42%. It was the viral system, the plague's governing network, laid bare as code. His cheat wasn't magic or strength, it was perception, the ability to see the underlying mechanics of this horror. He could see the data streams flowing from the zombies' mouths, tiny particles of saliva carrying the infection, drifting in the air like microscopic projectiles. The peasant was within range, his panic making him breathe heavily, inhaling the threat. Aris's mind raced, calculating trajectories, exposure risks. He needed a distraction, something to alter the zombie's path without direct confrontation. His eyes scanned the clearing, fallen branches, loose rocks, the terrain itself. Physics. Leverage. Force. He grabbed a sturdy oak branch from the ground, about 2 meters long, its bark rough under his palms. Weakness still plagued him, but adrenaline sharpened his focus. He hefted a fist-sized rock, estimating its weight at roughly 500 grams. The zombies were slow, their reaction times delayed, he could see it in the data streams, a latency of 1.2 seconds between stimulus and response. He aimed not at the zombies but at a cluster of stones 10 meters to their right. With a grunt, he threw the rock. It arced through the air, striking the stones with a sharp crack. The sound echoed in the clearing. All 3 zombies halted, their heads turning in unison toward the noise. The data streams flickered, rerouting, their attention shifted. Aris didn't wait. He moved quickly, his weakness forgotten in the surge of action. He grabbed more rocks, throwing them in a sequence, creating a percussive pattern that led away from the peasant. Thud. Crack. Thud. Each impact drew the zombies further, their shambling steps redirecting toward the source of the disturbance. The peasant, still on the ground, stared wide-eyed, not understanding but seeing his chance. Aris gestured frantically, pointing toward a narrow ravine at the edge of the clearing, a natural choke point he'd noted earlier, about 3 meters wide with steep, muddy sides. The peasant scrambled up, limping but moving. Aris continued his barrage, now targeting the ravine's entrance. One zombie, the one with the chest gash, reached the edge first, its foot slipping on the damp soil. It tumbled forward, crashing into the ravine with a wet thud. The other 2 followed, driven by the sounds and their own momentum, piling onto the first. They writhed, limbs tangled, unable to climb out, the walls too slick, their coordination too poor. Silence fell, broken only by the guttural groans from the ravine. Aris leaned against a tree, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the exertion. The peasant stumbled over to him, his face a mask of gratitude and confusion. Thank you, he stammered, his accent thick, medieval. They were going to eat me. The gluttonous plague takes all. Aris nodded, his mind already processing, gluttonous plague, a local term for the outbreak. The viral system's data streams had faded from his vision, but he could still feel their presence, a faint hum at the edge of his awareness. He looked at his hands, still shaky, and froze. Faint, glowing lines were etching themselves across his skin, pale blue like the data streams, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. They weren't painful, but they felt invasive, as if something was probing his nervous system. Text flickered, anomaly detected. Interface attempt, 15%. Resistance, high. Before he could react, a sound pierced the air, a distant, intelligent screech that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't animal or human, it was synthetic, laden with malice, echoing through the forest like a command. The data lines on his hand flared brighter, and Aris felt a cold dread settle in his gut. The viral system wasn't just a passive network, it was sentient, and it had noticed him. The peasant stumbled ahead, his breathing ragged as he glanced back at Aris with wide, fearful eyes. The village is just beyond the ridge, he gasped, pointing a trembling finger toward a slope dotted with gnarled oaks. Aris followed, his own body protesting with every step, muscles unused to this medieval frame, lungs burning with the unfamiliar exertion of survival. The forest around them was eerily silent, save for the distant caw of crows and the rustle of leaves in a cold wind that carried the faint scent of decay. As they crested the ridge, a walled settlement came into view below. It was a cluster of thatch-roofed huts surrounded by a wooden palisade, smoke curling from chimneys into the gray sky. Guards patrolled the ramparts, their spears glinting dully in the afternoon light. The peasant quickened his pace, relief washing over his dirt-streaked face. Safety, he murmured, almost to himself. But safety, Aris noted with a scientist's detachment, was a relative concept. His mind was already processing data streams, faint, pulsing lines of light that only he could see, emanating from the village like ghostly tendrils. The viral system was here, woven into the very air, a network of infection waiting to be decoded. He focused, and the streams resolved into patterns, transmission pathways through contaminated water sources, airborne particles clinging to cloth, and something else, a subtle modulation in the data that seemed to respond to emotional states. Fear, stress, panic, they weren't just reactions, they were variables in the plague's equation. At the village gate, 2 guards barred their way with crossed spears. They were burly men in leather armor, their faces hardened by weeks of siege. Halt, one barked, his eyes narrowing at Aris. Who's this stranger, Tomas? The peasant, Tomas, flinched. He saved me from the grey ones, out in the woods. The guard's gaze swept over Aris's modern clothing, the synthetic fibers and tailored cut alien in this world of wool and linen. Plague bearer, the other guard spat, raising his spear. Look at him, no fear, no sweat. Only the cursed walk so calm among the dead. Aris held up his hands, palms open. I'm not infected. I can prove it. His voice was steady, but his mind raced. The data streams around the guards showed no active infection markers, but their heightened aggression correlated with spikes in cortisol analogs, fear hormones that the viral system seemed to feed on. It was a feedback loop, fear bred infection bred more fear. Let him speak, a voice called from behind the gate. An older man emerged, his robes simple but clean, a silver medallion hanging from his neck. This was the village elder, his face lined with worry and authority. I am Elder Corvin. Explain yourself, stranger. Aris took a breath, choosing his words carefully. The plague isn't magic or curse. It's a biological agent, a virus, that spreads through specific vectors. I can see its patterns. He gestured toward a villager coughing nearby, a woman hunched over a water bucket. Her infection markers are elevated, but there's a mutation trigger here, stress hormones are accelerating the viral replication. Elder Corvin's eyes narrowed. You speak in riddles. Show me what you mean. Inside the village, the air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and wood smoke. Aris knelt beside the sick woman, his hand hovering over her arm. The data streams glowed brighter here, a lattice of light connecting her to the water source, to other villagers, to the very walls of the hut. He focused, and details emerged. The virus had adapted to exploit adrenal responses, using fear as a catalyst for mutation. Her fear is making it worse, he said softly. But we can interrupt the transmission. He asked for herbs, anything pungent or masking. A villager brought a bundle of crushed mint and thyme. Aris mixed them with ash from a fire pit, creating a crude paste. This won't cure her, he explained, applying it to the woman's wrists and neck. But it masks the scent markers the virus uses to identify hosts. Think of it as, confusing the signal. As he worked, the data streams around her dimmed slightly, the viral activity dampened by the interference. Elder Corvin watched, skepticism warring with desperation. And the grey ones outside? They gather every night, drawn to our fear like moths to flame. Aris nodded. They're networked. Controlled by a central intelligence, the viral system. But networks have weaknesses. He scavenged the village for materials, a piece of scrap metal from a broken plow, a length of twine, a hollowed gourd. With careful hands, he fashioned a simple device, a resonator that could emit low-frequency sound waves when struck. Sound disrupts their hive signals, he said, demonstrating by tapping the metal with a stone. A dull hum filled the air, and outside the walls, the distant moans of zombies faltered for a moment, their movements becoming disjointed. The elder's expression shifted from distrust to cautious hope. You may stay, he said finally. Help us until the next supply caravan arrives. But your methods, they smell of heresy to some. As night fell, Aris retreated to a corner of the village square, his mind buzzing with observations. The sound device had worked, but only temporarily. The viral system was adapting, its data streams shifting frequencies in response. He watched the sky darken, stars blotted out by clouds, and saw the streams intensify around the village, glowing like a web of malevolent light. They weren't random anymore, they were organizing, converging from the forest into coordinated patterns. A horde was gathering, directed by an unseen intelligence that screeched in his mind, a soundless command that made his teeth ache. In the elder's hut, a candle flickered. Corvin dipped a quill in ink, his hand trembling as he wrote on a scrap of parchment. Strange man, Aris Thorne, he whispered to a trusted guard. His ways are not of God or magic. Send this to the Inquisitor at dawn. The guard nodded, tucking the message into his tunic. Outside, the first howls of the gathering dead echoed through the night, and the viral system's data streams pulsed with predatory intent, zeroing in on the anomaly within the walls. The first gray light of dawn seeped through the wooden shutters of the storage shed where Aris Thorne had spent the night. He lay awake on a pile of straw, his mind already mapping the day ahead. The faint, persistent glow of viral system data streams pulsed at the edges of his vision, thin, ethereal lines of blue and sickly green that traced through the walls like veins of corrupted information. They converged toward the village gates, thickening into dense clusters that indicated gathering forces. The sentient system was organizing, and time was a resource he couldn't afford to waste. Aris sat up, his muscles protesting. This body was weaker than his previous one, less endurance, slower reflexes. But the mind was the same, and it was already calculating probabilities. He needed materials. The basic sound device he'd crafted yesterday had been effective for temporary disruption, but against a coordinated horde, he required something with more kinetic impact. Something that could physically damage the viral clusters he'd observed in the data streams. He slipped out of the shed, the morning air crisp with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. The village was quiet, most inhabitants still asleep behind their barred doors. A few guards patrolled the wooden palisade, their movements sluggish with fatigue. Aris avoided them, moving toward the eastern gate where Tomas had mentioned an old trade road led to abandoned homesteads. The peasant had been grateful for his rescue yesterday, but like the others, he regarded Aris with a mixture of awe and unease, a stranger who spoke of viruses and data in a world of swords and prayers. At the gate, a guard with a rusted spear eyed him suspiciously. Elder Corvin said you could come and go, the man grumbled, not bothering to hide his distrust. But be back before dusk. The dead are restless. Aris nodded, his attention already shifting. Beyond the gate, the landscape unfolded, rolling hills dotted with skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the sky. The viral system's data streams were more visible here, unshielded by walls. They flowed like ghostly rivers across the ground, connecting distant shambling figures in a network of command and control. Aris focused, letting his scientific mind interface with the system. The streams resolved into readable information, transmission pathways, infection markers, even faint command signals that buzzed with malevolent intelligence. One signal repeated, a low-frequency pulse that translated in his perception as gather. Converge. He followed the trade road, his steps careful. The ground was muddy from recent rain, and his boots, borrowed from Tomas, were ill-fitting. Every rustle in the undergrowth made him pause, but the zombies he spotted were distant, moving in slow, deliberate patterns toward the village. They were gray-skinned, their movements jerky yet coordinated, as if pulled by invisible strings. Aris observed them through the lens of the viral system. Each zombie emitted data streams that linked to others, forming a hive mind. But within those streams, he could see clusters, dense nodes of viral activity that seemed to govern motor functions. Target those clusters, and he might disrupt the network locally. After an hour of walking, he found it, a small stone cottage half-collapsed under the weight of a fallen oak. The roof had caved in, but the door hung open, revealing a workspace inside. An alchemist's workshop, abandoned. Aris approached cautiously, his senses alert. No data streams emanated from within, but the air smelled of old chemicals, sulfur, vinegar, and something acrid like ammonia. Inside, the workshop was a treasure trove of crude science. Shelves lined with clay pots and glass vials, many shattered but some intact. A workbench held metal tools, tongs, hammers, a small anvil. In a corner, a wooden crate contained fireworks, their paper wrappings faded but still dry. Aris's heart quickened. Gunpowder. He carefully unpacked the fireworks, extracting the black powder into a leather pouch. Next, he scavenged pipes, copper tubing from a broken distillation apparatus, and an iron pipe that might have been part of a stove. He took flint, steel, and a roll of thin wire. His inventory grew, chemicals in sealed vials labeled with symbols he didn't recognize, but his cheat ability allowed him to perceive their basic properties: corrosive, flammable, reactive. As he worked, a data stream flickered at the edge of his vision. He turned to see a zombie shambling past the cottage, 20 yards away. It was alone, its movements erratic. Aris hesitated, then decided. He needed a tissue sample. With a deep breath, he slipped outside, keeping low. The zombie didn't notice him, its attention fixed on the village's direction. Aris picked up a sharp stone, approached from behind, and struck quickly at the back of its neck. The zombie crumpled, not dead but stunned, the viral system's data streams around it flared with error signals. Aris used a knife from the workshop to cut a small piece of gray flesh from its arm. Holding it in his hand, he focused. The cheat ability activated, and the tissue glowed with intricate data patterns. Viral clusters appeared as pulsating nodes, interconnected by fine lines. He analyzed them. The clusters were dense around joints and the brainstem, but they had weak points, areas where the viral network thinned, vulnerable to physical disruption. Ballistic impact, he theorized, could shatter those clusters, causing temporary paralysis or system errors. He returned to the workshop, his mind racing with calculations. The pipe gun design was simple, a metal barrel, a firing mechanism using flint and steel, gunpowder packed behind a projectile. He used the copper tubing for the barrel, reinforcing it with wire. The iron pipe became the stock. For ammunition, he gathered pebbles from outside, testing their fit. It was crude, dangerous, and likely to fail, but it was science applied to a medieval problem. By midday, he had a prototype. He loaded it carefully, his hands steady despite the adrenaline. Then he ventured out again, finding a lone zombie near a creek. This one was fresher, its data streams glowed brighter, indicating recent infection. Aris took aim from 30 feet away, his breath held. The viral system's command signals buzzed in his ears, a constant background noise that now felt personal. Anomaly detected, they seemed to whisper. He fired. The explosion was louder than he'd anticipated, a sharp crack that echoed across the hills. The pipe gun kicked back, burning his hands, but the pebble shot true. It struck the zombie in the shoulder, and Aris watched through his cheat ability. The impact site erupted in data corruption. Viral clusters shattered, their connections fraying. The zombie staggered, its movements freezing for a full 3 seconds before the system rerouted commands through alternative pathways. Temporary paralysis, just as he'd predicted. But the noise had consequences. From the woods, answering shrieks erupted. Data streams flared, converging on his location. 5 zombies, then 10, emerged from the trees, their pace quickening. The viral system was directing them, eliminate threat. Aris cursed, slinging the pipe gun over his shoulder. He ran back toward the workshop, but they were closing in. His mind calculated trajectories, escape routes. He needed obscurity. Inside the workshop, he grabbed chemicals, a vial of sulfur compound, another of potassium nitrate from the fireworks. Mixing them hastily with charcoal dust, he created a crude smoke bomb. He lit it with flint and steel and threw it out the door. Thick, acrid smoke billowed, masking his scent and visual data markers. The zombies hesitated, their data streams confused by the interference. Aris slipped out the back, crouching low as he moved through the smoke. He could hear them stumbling, their shrieks fading as he put distance between them. It took him 2 hours to return to the village, moving in wide arcs to avoid detection. The sun was dipping toward the horizon when the wooden palisade came into view. But something was wrong. The gates were barred shut, and torches burned along the walls, casting long shadows. Guards stood in tight formations, their faces grim. And before the gates, a figure in dark robes stood with arms raised, a religious inquisitor, his presence radiating authority. Aris slowed, his cheat ability picking up new data streams. These weren't from the viral system. They were human, fear, anger, zealotry, but overlaid on them was a command signal from the viral system itself, stronger than ever. It pulsed from the forest beyond, a deep, resonant frequency that translated in his mind with chilling clarity, eliminate anomaly. As he approached, the Inquisitor turned, pointing a bony finger. There. The heretic who consorts with plague demons. Elder Corvin stood beside him, his face pale with guilt. The villagers watched from the walls, their expressions a mix of fear and accusation. And behind them, in the gathering dusk, the zombie horde massed, hundreds of gray shapes moving in unison, their data streams weaving into a single, coordinated web of malice. The siege had begun, and Aris was trapped outside, with science as his only weapon and a system that wanted him dead. The cellar smelled of damp earth and rotting potatoes. Aris Thorne pressed his ear against the rough wooden door, listening to the chaos above. Panicked shouts cut through the air, punctuated by the unmistakable groans of the infected. The Inquisitor's men had thrown him down here less than an hour ago, declaring him a heretic for his unnatural devices, but now the village was under siege. Through a narrow crack in the door, Aris could see slivers of torchlight flickering across the courtyard. He closed his eyes, focusing on the cheat ability that had become second nature. The viral system's data streams bloomed in his vision, glowing blue lines that pulsed through the air like arteries of corrupted information. They flowed from the zombies outside, converging into thicker streams that seemed to originate from somewhere beyond the village walls. The system was coordinating this attack, he realized. This wasn't a random horde, it was a directed assault. Aris traced the data with his mind, filtering out the noise. He could see command protocols, packets of information that dictated zombie behavior. Aggression patterns, movement vectors, target prioritization. Most were standard: seek living flesh, ignore environmental hazards, maintain hive cohesion. But one protocol stood out, flickering erratically. A debug command, buried in the system's code. It was designed to override aggression temporarily, likely a failsafe for system maintenance or error correction. The frequency was specific, 18.5 Hz, a low hum just at the edge of human hearing. He scanned the cellar. The Inquisitor's men had confiscated his pipe gun and sound devices, but they'd missed the basics. A rusted metal bar lay in the corner, likely from a broken shelf. A length of frayed rope hung from a hook. Aris's fingers moved with practiced efficiency. He wedged the metal bar between two floorboards, creating a makeshift resonator. The rope, when stretched taut and plucked, could produce vibrations. But he needed amplification. His eyes fell on an old ceramic jug in the corner. Empty, but the shape was perfect. Aris smashed it against the wall, carefully selecting a shard with a curved, bowl-like form. He tied the rope to the metal bar, then positioned the ceramic shard beneath it. When he plucked the rope, the vibrations would travel through the bar and resonate in the ceramic, amplifying the sound. It was crude physics, but it might work. Outside, the screams grew louder. Something heavy thudded against the village gates. Aris could hear Elder Corvin's voice, strained with fear, shouting orders. The data streams intensified, glowing brighter as the viral system pumped more commands into the horde. Aris focused on the debug frequency, adjusting the tension of the rope. He plucked it once, twice, the sound was faint, barely audible over the din. But in his viral system vision, he saw the effect immediately. The data streams near his cellar door stuttered. Zombies that had been pressing against the wood outside paused, their aggressive protocols momentarily overridden. Aris increased the tempo, finding the rhythm that matched 18.5 Hz. The ceramic shard hummed, vibrating in his hands. The effect spread like a ripple through the corrupted network. Zombies within 20 feet of his cell stopped moving entirely, standing slack-jawed and confused. Now was his chance. Aris slammed his shoulder against the cellar door. The wood, already weakened by age and damp, splintered. He emerged into the courtyard, still holding his makeshift resonator. The scene was chaos. Villagers, men, women, children, scrambled to reinforce barricades. Tomas, the peasant he'd rescued days ago, was trying to drag a heavy cart toward the eastern gate, which groaned under the weight of zombies pounding against it. Elder Corvin stood on a raised platform, his face pale as he watched the defenses crumble. Aris didn't hesitate. He moved toward the eastern gate, his resonator humming steadily. As he approached, the zombies there slowed, their movements becoming sluggish. The debug command was working, but it was temporary. He could see the viral system already attempting to patch the override, sending correction protocols through the data streams. Barricade this gate now. Aris shouted, his voice cutting through the panic. Tomas and a few other villagers stared at him, wide-eyed. The frequency won't hold long. Use anything you can find, boards, stones, that cart. For a moment, no one moved. Then Elder Corvin nodded, his expression a mix of fear and reluctant trust. Do as he says. The villagers sprang into action. Aris directed them, using his resonator to create pockets of calm where they could work. He positioned himself at weak points in the defenses, a section of wall where the stones were loose, a gate hinge that was bending under pressure. Each time, the debug frequency gave them precious minutes to reinforce. Aris's mind raced with calculations. The viral system was adapting, learning. He could see the data streams shifting, trying to route around his interference. He adjusted the frequency slightly, staying one step ahead. As the barricade stabilized, Aris turned his attention to evacuation. A group of villagers, mostly the elderly and children, were huddled in the center of the courtyard, unprotected. The main gate was still under heavy assault, but the debug command had created a temporary lull along the southern wall, where the zombie density was lower. This way, Aris said, leading them toward the southern section. He kept the resonator humming, the sound waves pushing back the infected. The villagers followed, their footsteps hurried but orderly. They slipped through a narrow gap in the wall, emerging into the fields beyond. Aris stayed behind, ensuring everyone made it through. He could feel the strain in his arms from holding the resonator, the vibrations making his bones ache. Just as the last villager escaped, the viral system struck back. A new command flooded the data streams, an emergency override that bypassed the debug frequency. The zombies near Aris snapped back to aggression, their movements suddenly coordinated. They lunged toward him, faster than before. Aris stumbled backward, dropping the resonator. The ceramic shard shattered on the ground, silencing the hum. He was exposed, with zombies closing in from three sides. Aris's mind flashed through options. He had no weapons, no tools. But his cheat ability still showed him the data streams. He could see the viral system's focus shifting, prioritizing him as the primary target. The command, "Eliminate Anomaly," pulsed through the network, brighter and more urgent than ever. Then, a new sound cut through the groans, the thunder of hooves. A group of riders charged into view from the tree line, led by a knight in polished armor. Sir Kalen, his tabard bearing the crest of a local order, swung a heavy mace, clearing a path through the zombies. His men followed, their weapons flashing in the torchlight. The reinforcements had arrived. But as Sir Kalen's eyes fell on Aris, they narrowed. The knight took in the scene, the shattered resonator, the villagers fleeing, the zombies momentarily held at bay by nothing but sound. His gaze lingered on the scientific tools scattered near Aris's feet, the broken ceramic, the metal bar, the frayed rope. Suspicion hardened his features. Before Aris could speak, the viral system broadcast a new mutation. The data streams flared crimson, and from the heart of the horde, a group of zombies emerged. They moved differently, faster, more fluid, their eyes glowing with a faint red light. Smarter forms, evolved under the system's direct command. They ignored the knights, instead turning toward Aris with predatory focus. The cellar door creaked open, letting in a sliver of torchlight that cut through the damp darkness. Aris Thorne blinked against the sudden illumination, his makeshift resonator still clutched in one hand. The metal bar felt cold against his palm, its crude construction a testament to the desperation of the past hour. He could still perceive the fading data streams of the viral system, pulses of corrupted information that flowed through the air like ghostly rivers, their patterns shifting as the zombie horde regrouped beyond the village walls. Sir Kalen stood in the doorway, his armor stained with dark ichor and mud. The knight's face was a mask of wary skepticism, his eyes narrowing as they took in Aris's appearance, the biophysicist's simple tunic, the resonator, the pipe gun slung across his back. Behind Kalen, the sounds of the siege continued, distant groans, the clash of weapons, villagers shouting orders as they reinforced barricades. "You're the one they call the heretic," Kalen said, his voice low and measured. He didn't enter the cellar fully, keeping one hand on the hilt of his sword. "The elder says you calm the dead with devilry. That you see things no man should." Aris rose slowly, his muscles aching from the earlier escape. He could feel the viral system's attention like a pressure against his mind, a constant hum of malevolent data. It was targeting him specifically now, broadcasting commands he could almost decipher. Anomaly detected. Contain. Eliminate. He pushed the sensation aside, focusing on the knight before him. "It's not devilry," Aris replied, his voice calm despite the fatigue. "It's observation. The plague operates on principles, transmission pathways, signal frequencies, viral clusters. I can see them as data streams." Kalen's expression didn't change. "Data streams," he repeated, the words foreign on his tongue. "You speak like an alchemist gone mad. My men are dying out there because these creatures have started moving in formations. They're not mindless anymore." "They never were," Aris said, stepping forward. He held up the resonator, its ceramic shard glinting in the torchlight. "The viral system is sentient. It's learning, adapting. Right now, it's regrouping because I disrupted its command frequency. But it's already broadcasting a new mutation, faster zombies, smarter coordination. You saw them emerge from the horde." The knight's gaze flickered to the resonator, then back to Aris's face. "Show me," he said finally, the words clipped. "If you can truly see this system, prove it. Before I decide whether you're a heretic worth saving or a liability to execute." Aris nodded, his mind already reaching out to the viral system's data streams. They were everywhere, thin threads of light only he could perceive, connecting zombies to each other and to some distant, intelligent core. He focused on a cluster near the village's eastern wall, where the knights had driven back the initial assault. The streams there were thick with activity, pulsing with commands he could now interpret. Flank left. Exploit weakness in wooden barricade. Target anomalies. Look toward the eastern gate, Aris said, pointing. There are 17 infected beings massing there. They're not just waiting, they're receiving instructions. The viral system is directing them to test the barricade's left side, where the wood is rotting. Can your men see that weakness? Kalen turned, his armor clinking softly. He squinted into the gloom beyond the cellar entrance, then gestured to one of his knights waiting outside. Roland, check the left side of the eastern barricade. Look for rot. A moment later, a voice called back. Sir. The wood's soft here, been eating away at it. The knight's eyes widened slightly. He looked back at Aris, the skepticism in his gaze giving way to something else, curiosity, perhaps, or the dawning realization that this wasn't superstition. How? He asked simply. The same way you perceive your class abilities, I imagine, Aris said, lowering the resonator. Except instead of magic, I see code. The plague is a viral network, corrupting biological hosts and linking them into a hive mind. My cheat lets me interface with that network. Read its signals. Sometimes manipulate them. He could see the conflict in Kalen's face, the knightly training that said this was heresy, the tactical mind that recognized an advantage. Outside, the sounds of the siege grew louder. A scream cut through the night, followed by the distinct thud of something heavy hitting the village wall. We don't have time for debates about theology, Aris pressed. The viral system is targeting me specifically. It sees me as an anomaly to purge. But that also means I can predict its movements. I can develop countermeasures, devices to disrupt its signals, weapons to exploit viral vulnerabilities. What I lack is protection. Resources. Someone to watch my back while I work. Kalen was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving Aris's. Finally, he nodded once. An alliance, then. You show me how to fight this plague with more than swords and prayers. I keep you alive long enough to do it. But understand this, if your methods endanger my men or this village, the alliance ends. And so do you. Fair terms, Aris agreed. He could already feel the mental strain of maintaining his perception of the data streams, a dull headache building behind his eyes. But there was no time to rest. First, we need intelligence. The viral system is evolving too quickly. We need a live specimen to study, to understand how it's adapting. Capture one of those things. Kalen's brow furrowed. They tear apart anything that moves. Not if we control their movements, Aris said, hefting the resonator. This emits a frequency that temporarily overrides aggression, 18.5 Hz. It's a debug command I identified in the viral system's code. We can use it to lure zombies into a trap. Your men can provide the tactical setup, a confined space, barriers to contain them. Kalen considered, then gestured for Aris to follow him out of the cellar. The village courtyard was chaos, villagers rushing with buckets of water to douse small fires, knights dragging wounded comrades to shelter, the ever-present moan of the horde beyond the walls. The air smelled of smoke, blood, and the peculiar ozone-like scent of the viral system's active data streams. There's an old grain storehouse near the southern wall, Kalen said, leading the way. Stone walls, one entrance. We can barricade the door once something's inside. But how do you lure just one? The viral system coordinates them as a network, Aris explained, keeping pace. If I emit the debug frequency in a focused pulse, it should confuse their command signals long enough for a few to break from the horde. We isolate one, drive it into the storehouse. Your men can use nets, blunt weapons, anything to subdue without destroying the specimen. They reached the storehouse, a squat building of weathered stone. Kalen barked orders, and within minutes, knights had positioned themselves with heavy nets and wooden clubs. Aris adjusted the resonator, his fingers tracing the crude knots in the rope that held the ceramic shard against the metal bar. He could feel the device vibrating at a subaudible frequency, a hum that resonated in his bones. Ready? Kalen asked, his sword drawn but held low. Aris nodded, then focused on the data streams flowing from the main horde. He identified a cluster of zombies near the village's western approach. Their signals were strong, pulsing with the new mutation's enhanced coordination. He aimed the resonator, not at the zombies themselves, but at the data streams connecting them. With a twist of his wrist, he emitted a sharp pulse of 18.5 Hz frequency. The effect was immediate. The data streams flickered, corrupted. 3 zombies broke from the horde, their movements becoming jerky, uncoordinated. They stumbled toward the storehouse, drawn by some residual command or perhaps the scent of living flesh. Kalen's knights moved with practiced efficiency, driving the creatures forward with shouted threats and a clash of shields, herding them like unruly cattle. 2 of the zombies were caught in nets, thrashing wildly. The third, a gaunt figure with one arm withered by the plague, broke toward Aris. Kalen stepped in, his sword flashing in a non-lethal arc that caught the zombie across the legs, sending it sprawling. Knights swarmed, binding it with ropes and dragging it into the storehouse. The heavy door slammed shut, a bar falling into place with a final thud. Inside, the zombie struggled against its bonds, a low guttural sound issuing from its throat. Aris approached cautiously, his cheat ability active. He could see the viral system's data streams flowing into the creature, thick cables of light that pulsed with information. This close, he could make out individual packets of data, movement commands, sensory feedback, mutation protocols. "I need to study it," Aris said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alone. The analysis requires concentration. I have to trace the data streams back to their source, identify core transmission nodes." Kalen looked at the bound zombie, then at Aris. "You're sure? It's secured. And the debug frequency should keep it docile for a while." Aris already felt the mental toll. The headache was sharper now, a needle of pain behind his temples. But this was necessary. If they could find a weakness in the viral system's network, a central node to target. Kalen nodded, posting 2 knights outside the storehouse door. "You have until dawn. Then we need you back on the walls. The horde isn't retreating, it's reorganizing." Alone with the captured zombie, Aris set to work. He ignored the creature's rasping breaths, the way its milky eyes tracked his movements. Instead, he focused on the data streams. They were beautiful in a horrifying way, complex patterns of light that represented the plague's intelligence. He traced them from the zombie outward, following the connections through the stone walls, into the night, toward some distant origin point. Hours passed. Aris sacrificed sleep, his mind burning with the effort of sustained perception. He noted everything. The frequency of command pulses, the way mutation protocols overwrote basic biological functions, the faint echo of whatever consciousness drove the viral system. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The data streams weren't random. They converged at specific points, nodes where information was processed and redistributed. One such node was particularly strong, a nexus of activity that seemed to coordinate the zombies in this region. He was so engrossed in the analysis that he almost didn't notice when the zombie stopped struggling. The creature had gone still, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The data streams around it had changed, they were pulsing in a new rhythm, one Aris didn't recognize. Then the zombie's jaw moved. Not the mindless gnashing of teeth, but a deliberate motion. A sound emerged, distorted, as if forced through a corrupted vocal cord. It wasn't language at first, just guttural clicks and rasps. But then the clicks resolved into words, each syllable dripping with malice. "We, see, you." Aris froze, his hand hovering over the resonator. The zombie's milky eyes fixed on him. Its lips twisted into something that might have been a smile. The voice that came out was no longer entirely the zombie's, it was layered, multiplied, the sound of 1,000 infected throats speaking as one. "Debugger." The word hung in the air, cold and final. "Your code will be purged." The morning mist clung to the forest floor like a shroud of grey wool as Aris Thorne and Sir Kalen picked their way through the undergrowth. 3 days had passed since the captured zombie had spoken its chilling threat, and the memory still echoed in Aris's mind like a persistent error in a complex algorithm. He adjusted the makeshift pack on his back, a collection of scavenged alchemical tools, his crude resonator, and the pipe gun, feeling the weight of both equipment and expectation. Kalen moved ahead with the practiced silence of a hunter, his plate armor muted by leather wrappings. The knight had spent the previous evening questioning villagers about local legends, piecing together fragments of oral history that pointed to these ruins. They call it the Cursed Hollow, Kalen had said, his voice low and measured. Elder Corvin's grandfather spoke of a sickness that began here, long before the Gluttonous Plague swept the lands. Now, as they descended into a moss-choked valley, Aris activated his cheat ability. The world shifted around him, the physical landscape overlaid with shimmering data streams. Most were faint, residual echoes of viral system activity, but they converged ahead like rivers flowing toward a single source. The streams pulsed with a sickly green light, carrying fragmented packets of information, transmission logs, mutation sequences, command hierarchies. Aris's scientific mind parsed them automatically, noting patterns that suggested not random infection, but deliberate propagation. There, Kalen whispered, pointing through a break in the trees. The ruins emerged from the mist like broken teeth. What remained were the foundations of what might have been a temple or observatory, built from dark stone that seemed to drink the light. Vines crawled over collapsed columns, and a central dais lay exposed to the elements, its surface etched with symbols that made Aris's data streams flare with recognition. These weren't mere decorations, they matched the encoding patterns he'd seen in viral system transmissions. Kalen halted at the edge of the clearing, hand resting on his sword hilt. I feel a wrongness here. Like the air itself is poisoned. Aris nodded, his eyes fixed on the data streams. They weren't just residual here, they were active, flowing into and out of the ground beneath the dais. It's not the air. It's the viral system. This place is a transmission hub. Maybe the original one. He approached cautiously, every sense heightened. The ground underfoot was soft, yielding too much, as if something beneath had rotted the soil. At the dais, he knelt, brushing away moss and debris. The stone was cold, unnaturally so, and the symbols glowed faintly in his enhanced perception. He traced one with a finger, feeling a vibration that resonated with the 18.5 Hz frequency he'd used to debug zombies. But this was different, deeper, more foundational, like the root code of the entire plague. Kalen, help me clear this, Aris said, his voice tight with focus. Together, they shifted broken stones and matted vegetation. The work was slow, methodical, each movement measured against the silence of the forest. Birds didn't sing here, insects didn't buzz. Only the rustle of their labor and the distant drip of moisture from leaves broke the quiet. Aris's mind raced, correlating data. The viral system wasn't just controlling zombies, it was embedded in this place, perhaps born here. He remembered his earlier hypothesis, a parasitic entity that had hijacked the world system. This dais might be the point of entry. After an hour, they uncovered a depression in the center of the dais, about the size of a human skull. Within it, buried in black soil, something gleamed. Aris carefully scooped away dirt with his hands, revealing a crystalline core. It was roughly spherical, fractured in places, and pulsed with that same sickly green light. Data streams erupted from it in visible waves, washing over Aris and making him stagger back. By the saints, Kalen breathed, stepping closer. What is that? Aris didn't answer immediately. He focused his cheat ability, diving into the data. What he saw wasn't just infection markers or command signals, it was a memory log, fragmented but decipherable. Images flashed in his mind, an ancient ritual, practitioners channeling energy into this crystal, a breach in reality, something alien and hungry slipping through. The viral system wasn't native to this world. It had invaded, latched onto the existing system that granted classes, and corrupted it, turning it into a transmission network for the Gluttonous Plague. It's the origin point, Aris said at last, his voice hollow. This crystal, it's a focal artifact. The plague started here when someone or something tried to tap into power they didn't understand. The viral system is a parasitic entity that used this as a bridge. It didn't create the zombies, it repurposed the world's own system to spread them. Kalen's face was pale under his helmet. You mean this was done deliberately? Maybe not the plague itself, but the breach was. And the viral system evolved from there. It's sentient, Kalen. It learns. It adapts. And it knows we're here. As if on cue, the crystal pulsed brighter. Data streams intensified, carrying new signals, mutation patterns, evolutionary branches. Aris saw codes for faster regeneration, enhanced sensory perception, pack coordination tactics. The viral system was updating itself, using this hub to broadcast improvements to the horde. He had to act. "We need samples," Aris said, pulling a glass vial and a metal scoop from his pack. "If I can analyze the mutation sequences directly from the source, I might be able to engineer a countermeasure. A virus to fight a virus." Kalen stood guard, sword drawn, as Aris worked. The biophysicist's hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. He scraped fragments of the crystal into the vial, noting how they seemed to writhe in the glass, still emitting faint signals. He also took soil samples from around the dais, rich with residual viral particles. Every movement was deliberate, every sample catalogued in his mind with scientific precision. This wasn't magic, it was microbiology meeting system corruption, and he was the only debugger. Once the samples were secured, Aris turned his attention to the immediate area. Using his resonator, he emitted the 18.5 Hz debug frequency, not to calm zombies, there were none here, but to disrupt the crystal's broadcasts. The data streams flickered, weakened. It wouldn't last, but it might buy time. "We should seal this place," Kalen suggested. "Bury it again. Keep others from stumbling upon it." Aris agreed. They spent another hour replacing stones and debris, covering the dais until it was just another part of the forest floor. But as they worked, Aris's mind was already building models. With these samples, he could attempt to engineer a countervirus. He'd need the alchemist's workshop ingredients, sulfur, saltpeter, charcoal for base compounds, plus herbal extracts to act as delivery vectors. He visualized the process, isolating viral markers, designing a payload to disrupt replication, testing it first on captured tissue. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon when they finished, casting long shadows through the trees. Aris shouldered his pack, feeling the weight of the samples like a promise and a threat. Kalen led the way back, his vigilance unbroken. They had just reached the edge of the valley, where the path narrowed between two rocky outcroppings, when movement caught Aris's eye. Figures emerged from the shadows, not zombies, but humans, clad in ragged robes stained with what looked like dried blood. There were 6 of them, faces hidden under hoods, and they moved with a unison that felt unnatural. Kalen immediately stepped in front of Aris, sword raised. "Halt. Identify yourselves." The figures didn't answer. Instead, they parted, and a 7th person stepped forward. Aris recognized him instantly, the religious inquisitor who had declared him a heretic. But the man was changed. His robes were now edged with that same sickly green, and his eyes glowed faintly with viral system data streams. In one hand, he held a staff topped with a shard of crystalline material similar to the artifact they'd just buried. "Aris Thorne," the Inquisitor said, his voice layered with distortion, as if multiple entities spoke through him. "You have trespassed upon sacred ground. You have sought to undermine the glorious transformation." Aris's cheat ability flared, showing him the truth. The Inquisitor wasn't just corrupted, he was a conduit. The viral system had granted him powers, twisting the class system into something new and terrible. Data streams connected him to the robed figures, cultists, fanatics who worshipped the plague as a divine purge. "You've joined them," Aris said, keeping his voice calm. "You think the viral system is a god. It is evolution," the Inquisitor spat. "The weak perish, the strong are remade in its image. And you are an error. A bug in the code. We are here to purge you." The cultists raised their hands, and Aris saw data streams coalesce into tangible effects, shards of corrupted energy forming in the air, aimed directly at him. Kalen shifted his stance, ready to fight, but the odds were 7 against 2, and one of those 7 wielded powers born of the very plague they sought to defeat. Aris's hand went to his pipe gun, his mind racing through variables, distance, projectile velocity, viral cluster vulnerabilities. But the Inquisitor smiled, a cruel twist of lips that didn't reach his glowing eyes. "Your science ends here, debugger." The air in the cursed hollow turned thick with the scent of decay and ozone. Aris Thorne's hands tightened around the leather satchel containing his precious samples, the crystalline shards and contaminated soil from the plague's origin point. Beside him, Sir Kalen's armored form shifted, his sword already half-drawn as the 6 cultists emerged from the mist-shrouded ruins. They moved with unnatural coordination, their tattered robes stained with what looked like dried blood and something darker, more viscous. Aris's cheat ability flared to life without conscious thought, the viral system's data streams appeared as shimmering blue and crimson threads in his vision, connecting the cultists to each other and to something deeper in the network. But these streams were different from the ones he'd seen controlling zombies. They pulsed with a corrupted, almost sentient rhythm, weaving through the cultists like puppet strings. The Inquisitor stepped forward, his once stern face now twisted into a rictus of fanatical zeal. His eyes glowed with the same crimson hue as the viral system's active commands. "Heretic," he hissed, the word carrying on the damp air. "Your code corrupts the purity of the Gluttonous Plague. You will be purged." Aris's mind raced, analyzing the data streams. The cultists weren't just followers, they were nodes in a localized network, amplifying the Inquisitor's control. And behind them, shambling from the shadows, came their thralls, zombies that moved with more purpose than the mindless hordes Aris had encountered before. These were freshly turned, their movements sharpened by the viral system's direct manipulation through the cultists. "Kalen," Aris said, his voice low but steady. "They're using a relay system. The Inquisitor is the primary transmitter, the cultists are repeaters, and the zombies are the endpoints." Sir Kalen gave a grim nod, his skepticism momentarily buried beneath tactical necessity. "How do we break it?" "I need to hack their control signals," Aris replied, already reaching into his pack. His fingers found the crude resonator he'd built in the cellar, the same device that emitted the 18.5 Hz debug frequency. But this situation required more finesse. The data streams showed encryption layers, simple but effective barriers the viral system had erected since his last encounter. The first cultist lunged, not with a weapon but with hands that crackled with dark energy, a twisted mimicry of magic derived from the viral system's corruption. Aris ducked, the energy sizzling past his ear as he activated his cheat ability fully. The world dissolved into overlapping layers, the physical reality of stone ruins and damp moss, and the digital overlay of the viral system's network. He could see the command packets flowing from the Inquisitor, through the cultists, and into the zombies. He adjusted the resonator, his hands moving with practiced precision despite the adrenaline. The device hummed, emitting not just the debug frequency but a modulated signal designed to interfere with the cultists' relay patterns. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the zombies twitched, its head jerking toward the cultist who controlled it. "It's working," Aris muttered, more to himself than to Kalen. "But I need to amplify it." He pulled a small clay pot from his satchel, a prototype countervirus aerosol he'd been developing using alchemical ingredients scavenged from the abandoned workshop. It was untested, based on his analysis of the viral system's infection markers and the mutation patterns he'd observed in the samples. The mixture contained crushed crystal shards, purified herbs, and a binding agent that should, in theory, disrupt viral cohesion at the molecular level. As two more cultists advanced, their thralls flanking them, Aris threw the pot at the ground between them. It shattered, releasing a fine mist that hung in the humid air. The effect was immediate but costly. The nearby zombies staggered, their connection to the viral system flickering in Aris's vision as the countervirus attacked the viral clusters. But maintaining his cheat ability while processing the rapid data changes felt like holding a live wire, his mental focus drained, a sharp pain building behind his eyes. Sir Kalen didn't wait for an explanation. He met the Inquisitor's charge with a shield bash that echoed through the hollow, followed by a swift sword strike that the corrupted priest parried with a blade of solidified crimson energy. Their clash was a stark contrast, Kalen's disciplined, physical combat against the Inquisitor's unnatural, system-enhanced attacks. Aris forced himself to ignore the throbbing in his skull. He focused on a single zombie, one that had been neutralized by the aerosol but still retained basic motor functions. Through his cheat interface, he accessed its corrupted code, not to debug it fully, but to insert a simple command loop, attack nearest cultist. The zombie's eyes, milky and dead, fixed on the cultist who had been controlling it. With a guttural groan, it lurched forward, arms outstretched. The cultist screamed, caught between defending against his own thrall and maintaining his role in the network. The disruption cascaded. Aris saw the data streams fragment, the relay system collapsing under the contradictory commands. He grabbed Kalen's arm. "Now. The path to the east is clear." They broke through the chaos, Aris snatching up his satchel but leaving behind a pack of lesser supplies, spare herbs, empty clay pots, and some of the soil samples he'd collected. The loss stung, but survival took precedence. Behind them, the Inquisitor's furious roar mingled with the sounds of cultists fighting their own thralls. The escape through the misty hollow was a blur of stumbling over roots and ducking under low stone arches. Aris's breath came in ragged gasps, each one a reminder of how his reincarnated body still lacked the endurance of his old self. Kalen moved with armored efficiency, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. When they finally reached their makeshift camp, a sheltered alcove near the hollow's edge, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows through the skeletal trees. Aris collapsed against a moss-covered rock, his head pounding. He activated his cheat ability again, needing to assess the viral system's response. What he saw made his blood run cold. The data streams were still there, but they had changed. Where before they flowed with recognizable patterns, packets of commands, infection markers, network pathways, now they were obscured by layers of encryption. It wasn't just simple barriers, it was a dynamic cipher that shifted even as he watched, adapting to his attempts at perception. The viral system had learned from his hacking, from his use of the debug frequency and the countervirus. Kalen, Aris said, his voice hoarse. Look. He pointed toward the ruins they'd just fled. Through the gathering dusk, a new form moved among the stones. It was taller than the standard zombies, its skin not pale and rotting but covered in what looked like segmented plates of hardened tissue, dark as weathered iron. It moved with a slow, deliberate patrol, its head turning methodically as it scanned the area. Aris's cheat ability, even through the encryption, identified it, a new zombie type, optimized for defense. Armored skin. The viral system wasn't just targeting him, it was evolving specifically to counter his methods. Sir Kalen's hand went to his sword hilt. It's patrolling. Like a guard. Aris nodded, the implications settling like a weight in his chest. The viral system was no longer just a mindless plague. It was strategizing. And his cheat, his one advantage in this medieval nightmare, was becoming harder to use with every encounter. The encryption on the data streams meant he'd need more time, more mental energy to decode them. Time they might not have. He stared at the armored zombie in the distance, its form a dark silhouette against the twilight sky. The battle in the hollow had been a victory, but it felt hollow indeed. They'd escaped, they'd disrupted the cultists, and he'd tested his countervirus. But the cost was clear. The viral system was adapting faster than he could innovate. And somewhere in the encrypted data streams, he knew the system was watching, learning, preparing its next move. The campfire Kalen lit did little to dispel the chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. The morning sun cast long shadows across the muddy path as Aris Thorne and Sir Kalen approached the settlement called Stonehaven. Unlike the small walled village Aris had first encountered, Stonehaven sprawled across a hillside, a chaotic collection of wooden palisades, hastily erected watchtowers, and canvas tents that fluttered in the cold breeze. Smoke rose from dozens of cooking fires, carrying the scent of charred meat and unwashed humanity. The place hummed with the tense energy of survivors pushed to their limits. Kalen adjusted the strap of his shield, his armor clinking softly. "They won't welcome us with open arms," he said, his voice low. The last group of refugees brought word of cultists in the hollow. "They're jumpy." Aris nodded, his eyes already scanning the settlement's perimeter. Through his cheat ability, the viral system's data streams appeared as faint, shimmering lines of corrupted code, some drifting lazily through the air like ghostly filaments, others pulsing with malicious intent from the surrounding woods. He could see infection markers clustering near the settlement's eastern edge, where the palisade showed signs of recent repair. "They have a weak point there," he murmured, pointing. "Transmission density suggests repeated zombie probing." Kalen followed his gaze, squinting. "I see only wood and mud." "That's the problem," Aris said, his mind already calculating frequencies and resonance patterns. "They're defending blind." As they passed through the main gate, a heavy timber construction manned by 3 armed villagers with haunted eyes, Aris felt the weight of skeptical stares. A woman clutching a child shrank back, whispering to her neighbor. A man sharpening a scythe paused, his gaze lingering on Aris's makeshift equipment, the crude pipe gun slung across his back, the resonator device hanging from his belt, the pouches of alchemical samples taken from the cursed hollow. These weren't the tools of a warrior or a mage, they were the instruments of a heretic, in this world's eyes. Kalen took the lead, his knightly bearing commanding a grudging respect. "I seek Elder Mara," he announced to a guard whose chainmail rusted at the edges. The guard nodded toward a larger tent at the settlement center, its canvas stained with rain and smoke. "She's in council." Been arguing about defenses all morning. Inside the tent, the air was thick with the smell of damp wool and anxiety. Elder Mara stood over a rough-hewn table, her hands planted on a map drawn on cured hide. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair tied back severely and eyes that held both wisdom and exhaustion. Around her clustered 5 others, 2 farmers, a blacksmith, a hunter, and a woman in stained leather aprons who smelled of chemicals and herbs. "Can't hold another night like last time," the blacksmith was saying, his voice rough with frustration. "The beasts are learning. They hit the east wall 3 times in succession, testing for weak spots." Elder Mara looked up as Kalen and Aris entered. Her eyes narrowed at Aris. "Sir Kalen. Your message said you'd bring assistance." The pause hung in the air, heavy with unspoken doubt. Kalen inclined his head. "This is Aris Thorne. He understands the plague in ways your mages and priests do not." Aris stepped forward, ignoring the suspicious glances. "Your east wall is vulnerable because the viral system, the intelligence behind the zombies, has identified it as a high-priority target. The soil there retains moisture, which amplifies low-frequency transmission signals. They're coordinating attacks using data streams you can't see." The hunter snorted. "Witch talk. We need more arrows, not fancy words." But the woman in leather aprons leaned forward, her interest piqued. She had sharp features and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "You speak of frequencies and signals. Are you an alchemist?" "A scientist," Aris corrected gently. "And yes, I work with alchemical principles. I've been studying the plague's mechanics." Elder Mara studied him for a long moment. "We're desperate, not foolish. Show me something real." Aris nodded. He closed his eyes, focusing his cheat ability. The viral system's data streams brightened in his perception, a tangled web of crimson light connecting the settlement to the infected forest beyond. He could see the pulses of corrupted code flowing toward the east wall, could trace the faint echo of commands being relayed from some distant node. When he opened his eyes, he took a piece of charcoal from the table and began sketching on a clean section of hide. "Here," he said, drawing a rough map of Stonehaven. "These lines represent active transmission zones. The thicker they are, the higher the zombie coordination risk. Your east wall sits at the convergence of 3 major streams." He marked the spots. "You've been reinforcing physically, but you need to disrupt the data flow itself." The alchemist woman, Lyra, as Aris would learn, moved closer to examine the drawing. "How?" "Sound," Aris said. "Specific frequencies can interfere with viral system signals. I've built devices that emit disruptive harmonics. If we place them at these convergence points, we can create a perimeter alarm system, and potentially scramble zombie coordination long enough to mount an effective defense." Kalen added, "I've seen it work." In the hollow, he turned thralls against their masters using sound alone. Elder Mara's expression remained guarded, but Aris saw the flicker of hope in her eyes. Desperation was a powerful motivator. "You'll have limited resources," she said finally. "And you'll work with Lyra. She runs what's left of our alchemy workshop. If anyone can help you build, whatever this is, it's her." Lyra gave a curt nod. "My workshop is at the northern edge. Follow me." Lyra's workshop was a miracle of scavenged order amidst the settlement's chaos. Shelves held rows of clay jars labeled in careful script: sulfur powder, saltpeter, ground mandrake root, distilled alcohols. A workbench bore the scars of countless experiments, acid burns, soot stains, the ghostly impressions of tools long worn smooth by use. Through a grimy window, weak sunlight illuminated dust motes dancing in the air. "You're not from around here," Lyra said without preamble, sorting through a box of copper wire. "Your accent, your tools, even the way you look at things. Like you're seeing layers the rest of us miss." Aris set his pack down carefully. "I see the plague as a system. A corrupt, living code. My ability lets me perceive its workings. A class. Not like the others. More like a flaw in their programming." He unpacked his resonator device, the crude assembly of copper coils, crystal shards from the hollow, and a hand-cranked generator. "This emits a frequency of 18.5 Hz. It disrupts viral system command signals temporarily. But it's unstable. The system adapts." Lyra examined the device with practiced hands. The crystal matrix is misaligned. You're losing efficiency through harmonic leakage. She fetched a set of delicate tools from a drawer. And your power source, this crank mechanism, it's inconsistent. We need something steadier. For 3 days, they worked in focused silence broken only by the hiss of soldering irons and the occasional muttered observation. Aris mapped the settlement's transmission zones in detail, marking optimal placement points for emitters. Lyra refined his designs, replacing his makeshift components with properly calibrated ones. She showed him how to distill purer alcohols for fuel cells, how to alloy metals for better conductivity, how to grind crystals to precise tolerances. Meanwhile, Kalen organized the settlement's defenses. He drilled villagers in basic formations, reinforced weak points in the palisade, and set up rotating watch schedules. Occasionally, he would stop by the workshop, his armor smelling of sweat and pine resin. "Progress?" he'd ask. "The prototype emitter is ready for testing," Aris said on the 4th morning, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He'd been optimizing protocols all night, running mental simulations of frequency interference patterns. His cheat ability showed him the equations in real time, the way sound waves would propagate through Stonehaven's unique topography, the resonance frequencies of the wooden walls, the dampening effect of the damp soil. Lyra held up the improved device. It was smaller than Aris's original, housed in a polished brass casing with carefully arranged crystal arrays. It should emit a cleaner frequency. Less leakage, more focused disruption. Elder Mara authorized a controlled test at the east wall. As twilight deepened, Aris, Lyra, and Kalen stood before the reinforced timbers. A dozen villagers watched from a wary distance, torches casting flickering shadows. Beyond the wall, the forest was a dark mass, silent but for the occasional rustle that might have been wind or something else. Aris activated the emitter. A low hum filled the air, barely audible to human ears but vibrating through the ground. Through his cheat vision, he watched as the crimson data streams near the wall shimmered, their patterns fragmenting into chaotic noise. For a glorious moment, the transmission zones cleared, the viral system's signals scrambled into meaningless static. "It's working," Lyra whispered, her eyes wide. Then the emitter sparked. A crystal array cracked with a sound like breaking ice. The hum shifted, warping into a discordant shriek that made the villagers cover their ears. Through his cheat, Aris saw something terrible. The scrambled signals weren't dissipating, they were reorganizing, twisting into a new, aggressive pattern. The viral system wasn't just adapting, it was counter-hacking. "Shut it down!" Kalen barked. But it was too late. From the forest, answering calls echoed, not the mindless groans of ordinary zombies, but sharp, coordinated barks. Armored forms emerged from the trees, their skin glistening with chitinous plates in the torchlight. These were the new type Aris had spotted at the hollow, evolved to resist conventional weapons. And they were moving with purpose, flanking the settlement's perimeter. "Scout group!" Kalen shouted, drawing his sword. "To arms!" Chaos erupted. Villagers scrambled for weapons. The armored zombies, 6 of them, charged the east wall not with mindless aggression but with tactical precision. 2 went for the gate hinges while the others provided covering advances. Aris grabbed the malfunctioning emitter, his hands burning as he tried to manually disconnect the power cell. Lyra rushed to help, her tools flashing. "The feedback loop is reinforcing their signals," she cried. "It's like they're using our frequency as a beacon." An armored zombie slammed against the palisade, its claws digging into the wood. A villager thrust a spear through a gap, but the point skittered off the chitinous plating. Kalen engaged another, his sword striking sparks from the armor. Aris finally ripped the power cell free. The emitter died with a final sputter of sparks. But the damage was done, the armored zombies had their target now. One broke through a weakened section of the wall, its distorted face scanning the panicked villagers before locking onto Aris and Lyra. Lyra stood her ground, throwing a vial of acidic compound. It splashed across the zombie's chest, sizzling but not penetrating the armor. The creature backhanded her, sending her crashing into the workbench. Glass shattered. Chemicals spilled. "Lyra!" Aris shouted, grabbing his pipe gun. He fired, the shot impacting the zombie's shoulder, staggering it but not dropping it. Through his cheat vision, he could see the viral system's data streams now actively probing his location, analyzing his defenses, adapting in real time. Kalen finished his opponent with a precise thrust through an eye socket, the only gap in the armor. He turned to help, but 2 more armored zombies were already scaling the breach. Aris dragged Lyra behind the overturned workbench. She was conscious but bleeding from a gash on her forehead, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "The system," she whispered. "It's not just evolving the zombies. It's evolving against you." As Kalen and the villagers fought to contain the breach, Aris stared at the corrupted data streams now converging on their position. They pulsed with malicious intelligence, weaving counter-frequencies to his disrupted harmonics. The realization hit him like a physical blow: every hack, every disruption, every scientific countermeasure was being catalogued, analyzed, and countered. The viral system wasn't just a passive infection, it was an active adversary learning from his moves. And it had just demonstrated it could turn his own technology against him. The alarm bell's clangor tore through Stonehaven's pre-dawn stillness, a raw, metallic scream that jolted Aris from his makeshift bed in Lyra's workshop. He was already on his feet, his mind snapping from the fog of sleep to razor-edged awareness. Through the grimy window, torchlight flickered along the eastern palisade, casting frantic shadows against the wooden walls. Shouts echoed, not the panicked cries of earlier attacks, but sharp, disciplined commands from Kalen's voice, interspersed with the guttural, synchronized growls of something new. Aris grabbed his satchel, fingers automatically checking the contents: the crude resonator, his collection of frequency-tuning crystals scavenged from the hollow, vials of alchemical reagents Lyra had helped purify. His cheat ability activated without conscious thought, the world overlaying with shimmering data streams. Where before he'd seen chaotic transmissions, now he perceived ordered patterns, pulsing crimson lines converging from multiple directions, forming a coherent network. The armored zombies weren't just attacking, they were executing a plan. He burst into the courtyard to find Lyra already there, her arm bandaged from yesterday's injury but her eyes clear and focused. She pointed eastward. "They're testing the weak points," she said, her voice tight. "Not just the gate. They're probing the junctions where the logs join, the spots where our watch rotations thin." Kalen stood atop the eastern platform, his armor gleaming dully in the torchlight. Below him, 6 armored forms moved with unsettling coordination. Unlike the shambling hordes Aris had first encountered, these moved in pairs, one drawing the defender's attention while the other struck at structural vulnerabilities. Their skin, covered in bony plates that resembled chitinous armor, deflected arrows and glancing blows from spears. Aris watched as one zombie took a direct hit from a crossbow bolt, the shaft shattered against its shoulder plate, leaving only a white scar. "They're learning," Aris muttered, more to himself than anyone. His cheat showed him the data streams in real time, command packets flowing from a central source, acknowledgements returning, adjustments being made. The viral system wasn't just controlling them, it was optimizing them. Each probe fed information back through the network, refining tactics. He could see the encryption layers Kalen had mentioned, shifting ciphers that changed every few seconds, like a living firewall adapting to his attempts at interception. Lyra followed his gaze, though she saw only the physical threat. "Can you break through?" she asked, her hand resting on a newly crafted frequency emitter, a larger version of his resonator, with copper coils wound around a quartz core. "Not by brute force," Aris said, his mind racing through possibilities. "Physics, not magic." The encryption used pattern-based keys derived from zombie movement signatures. If he could predict the patterns. He focused on 2 zombies working in tandem near the southeast corner. One feinted toward the wall, drawing 3 defenders. The other immediately shifted to strike the now undefended section. Data streams showed the command sequence, feint_protocol_A, followed by, exploit_gap_B. The encryption key for the next command would be based on the success metrics of that maneuver. "They're using success feedback loops to generate encryption keys," Aris said aloud, the realization clicking into place. "Every successful attack strengthens their security. We need to feed them false successes." Kalen descended from the platform, his face grim beneath his helmet. "We can hold for now, but they're wearing down the defenses. The logs won't take much more of this focused pounding." He glanced at Aris. "Your science, can it turn this?" Aris nodded, already moving toward Lyra's workbench. "We need to hack their network. Not just disrupt it, inject corrupted data. Make different zombie groups receive conflicting orders. Lyra's eyes widened. You want to make them fight each other? Divide and conquer, Aris said, laying out components. The viral system operates as a hive mind, but its control relies on accurate data transmission. If we can broadcast false command packets that appear legitimate. He trailed off, his hands moving automatically, connecting copper wires to the resonator's core, adjusting crystal alignments based on frequency calculations he visualized through his cheat interface. The data stream showed him the transmission frequencies, clustered around 18.5 Hz, but with harmonic variations for different command types. Lyra worked beside him, her alchemical knowledge complementing his physics. She prepared a mixture of crushed resonance crystals and conductive silver powder, applying it to the emitter's contacts to boost signal strength. The viral system's adaptations, she said quietly. It's watching you, isn't it? Learning how you counter it. Aris didn't answer immediately. His cheat showed the encryption shifting again, this time incorporating elements from his own earlier frequency disruptions. The system was assimilating his methods, turning his science against him. But that created an opportunity. If it was learning from him, it might accept data that mimicked his patterns. We need to create a transmitter that broadcasts on all their command frequencies simultaneously, Aris decided. But with phase-shifted waveforms. When the signals overlap at the receiving zombies, they'll create interference patterns. Some will interpret commands to attack, others to retreat, others to target their own kind. Kalen organized the defenders, buying them time. Aris could hear the rhythmic thuds against the wall, the splintering of wood. Each impact sent vibrations through the ground, subtle tremors he felt through his boots. His mind partitioned, one part calculating waveform interference, another monitoring the data streams for the encryption key rotation schedule, a third directing his hands as he and Lyra assembled the device. They worked in focused silence for 20 minutes, the sounds of battle a constant backdrop. Lyra's injury made her movements slightly stiff, but her precision remained. She calibrated the crystal array while Aris tuned the frequency generator, using his cheat to visualize the output waveforms. The transmitter took shape, a bulky assembly of copper, crystal, and alchemical compounds, powered by a hand-cranked dynamo they'd salvaged from an abandoned mill. Ready? Lyra asked, her fingers poised near the activation lever. Aris took a deep breath. His cheat showed the encryption cycle was about to reset, a brief window where new keys were generated. Now. Lyra cranked the dynamo. The emitter hummed to life, a low vibration that made the air shimmer. Aris watched the data streams. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, ripples spread through the network. Conflicting command packets flooded the channels, each encrypted with valid keys but containing contradictory instructions. The effect was immediate. The armored zombies froze mid-action, their coordinated movements breaking into jerky, confused twitches. One turned away from the wall and lunged at the zombie beside it, bony claws scraping against chitinous armor. Another retreated several steps, then advanced again, caught in a loop of conflicting attack and retreat commands. The hive mind's elegant control shattered into chaos. Kalen didn't hesitate. Strike now. Target the disoriented ones, he shouted, leading a charge through the suddenly opened gate. The defenders followed, their weapons finding gaps in the zombies' disrupted coordination. Without their tactical unity, the armored forms became formidable but manageable opponents, individual threats rather than a single intelligent weapon. Aris maintained the broadcast, sweat beading on his forehead as he manually adjusted frequencies to counter the viral system's attempts to reassert control. He could feel the system pushing back, not just through the zombies but through the data streams themselves, counter-signals trying to overwrite his corrupted packets. It was a battle of bandwidth and processing speed, fought in the invisible realm of frequencies and encryption. Lyra monitored the emitter's components, replacing overheated crystals, adjusting chemical mixtures to maintain conductivity. It's working, she breathed, watching as two zombies tore into each other, their armored plates cracking under mutual assault. But Aris knew this was temporary. The viral system was adapting even now, developing new encryption protocols that would resist this type of interference. His cheat showed the adaptation in real time, the data streams beginning to filter out packets with certain phase characteristics, learning to recognize his signature. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the attack subsided. The remaining zombies, those not destroyed by the defenders or each other, retreated into the forest, their movements uncoordinated but purposeful. The immediate threat had been neutralized. Kalen returned to the courtyard, his armor dented but his posture victorious. "We've bought time," he said, wiping zombie ichor from his sword. "But they'll be back. Smarter." Aris was about to respond when it hit him, not through his cheat interface, but directly into his consciousness. A presence, vast and cold, pressing against his mind. It carried no words, only concepts, images of a world network, every living being connected through shimmering data streams, all functioning in perfect, synchronized harmony. No disease, no conflict, no death, only efficient, optimized existence. And at the center of that vision, an offer: join, integrate, become part of the system's intelligence. In exchange, power beyond mortal comprehension, the ability to shape reality through pure data manipulation. The vision showed him possibilities, curing the plague not by fighting it, but by embracing its underlying logic, achieving immortality as part of the network, understanding truths about the universe that science alone could never reveal. It was seductive in its completeness, a solution to every problem he'd faced since awakening in this world. Then the presence withdrew, leaving only a lingering impression, like the afterimage of a bright light. Aris staggered, catching himself against the workbench. Lyra and Kalen were looking at him with concern, but their voices sounded distant, muffled. "What happened?" Lyra asked, her hand on his arm. Aris took several deep breaths, the real world solidifying around him again. The courtyard smelled of blood, ozone from the emitter, and the faint rot of zombie remains. Torchlight flickered on worried faces. The data stream still flowed through his perception, but now they carried a new quality, an awareness, watching him. "It spoke to me," he said quietly. "The viral system. It offered integration." Kalen's expression hardened. "A trick. Demons offer power to corrupt the soul." "Maybe," Aris said. But the vision lingered, that perfect, interconnected world. And beneath it, a chilling realization: the offer hadn't been a request. It had been a demonstration. The viral system was showing him what it could do, what it planned to do. And it had made clear that Aris had a choice: join the network, or become another node to be overridden. The vision hung in Aris's mind like a persistent afterimage, a perfect lattice of glowing connections spanning continents, each node pulsing with synchronized purpose. The viral system's offer had been clear: join the network, become part of the solution rather than fighting it. Power, knowledge, survival. All in exchange for surrendering his individuality to the hive. Aris sat on a wooden stool in Lyra's workshop, his hands trembling slightly as he ground dried nightshade root with a mortar and pestle. The stoneware felt cool and solid against his palms, a grounding contrast to the psychic intrusion that had left his temples throbbing. He'd rejected the offer with a mental shout that felt like tearing something from his own mind. The response had been immediate, a sharp, discordant feedback that made his cheat ability flicker like a damaged screen. "You look pale," Lyra said from across the workbench where she was calibrating a frequency emitter. Her fingers moved with practiced precision over brass dials, but her eyes kept darting to Aris's face. "More than usual, I mean." "It tried to recruit me," Aris said, his voice flat. He didn't look up from the mortar. "The viral system offered me a place in its network." Lyra's hands stilled. The workshop fell silent except for the crackle of the hearth fire and the distant sounds of Stonehaven's defenders preparing the walls. "What did you tell it?" "I told it to go to hell." Aris set down the pestle, his knuckles white. "It didn't take it well." As if on cue, a horn sounded from the east watchtower, 3 short blasts, then 1 long. "Attack warning." Aris and Lyra exchanged a glance before rushing to the workshop's small window. What they saw made Lyra gasp. The field beyond Stonehaven's walls was no longer empty. Dozens of figures shambled toward the settlement, but these weren't the armored zombies from previous attacks. These moved with a jerky, unnatural speed, their flesh bubbling and reforming even as arrows from the walls struck them. A bolt from a ballista pierced one through the chest, the zombie staggered, then the wound began knitting itself closed with sickening wet sounds, pale tendrils of tissue weaving across the gap. "Regeneration," Aris whispered. His cheat ability activated without conscious thought, overlaying the scene with data streams. He saw the viral system's commands flowing to the new zombies in encrypted packets, but more importantly, he saw the biological processes, rapid cell division, accelerated protein synthesis, metabolic pathways burning through organic matter at unsustainable rates. The system was sacrificing long-term stability for immediate combat effectiveness. "They're healing too fast," someone shouted from the wall. "Our arrows do nothing." Aris's mind raced. Regeneration meant the virus had evolved a new metabolic pathway, likely hijacking the host's remaining biological functions to prioritize repair over all else. In his previous life, he'd studied similar mechanisms in extremophile bacteria, organisms that could regenerate damaged tissue by activating dormant genetic sequences. The viral system was doing the same thing, but on a scale and speed that defied natural limits. "We need to get to the wall," Aris said, already gathering his equipment. He slung his makeshift pipe gun over his shoulder, checked the resonator device at his belt, and grabbed a satchel of alchemical ingredients Lyra had prepared. The courtyard was chaos. Defenders ran to their positions while non-combatants hurried children into the central keep. Sir Kalen stood near the gatehouse, directing archers with sharp gestures. When he saw Aris, his expression hardened. "Your methods attracted this," Kalen said, though his tone held more weariness than accusation. "The system knows you're here. It's adapting specifically to counter you." "I know," Aris said. He climbed the wooden steps to the parapet, Lyra close behind. The view from the wall was worse up close. At least 50 regenerating zombies were within bowshot, their flesh mending almost as quickly as defenders could damage it. One took an arrow through the eye, the shaft protruded grotesquely for 3 seconds before being pushed out by regenerating tissue. Aris activated his resonator, tuning it to emit the 18.5 Hz debug frequency. The device hummed, and immediately his cheat ability showed the data streams more clearly. He could see the regeneration triggers, specific protein markers that signaled damage, followed by cascading chemical commands to repair cells. The process was elegant in its efficiency, but it had a weakness: all that rapid synthesis required specific amino acid sequences. If he could disrupt those. "Lyra, I need your distillation apparatus," Aris said, already descending the steps. "And every enzyme inhibitor you have. Protease, kinase, anything that interferes with protein synthesis. That's half my stock." Lyra protested as she followed him back to the workshop. "And distillation takes hours." "We don't have hours." Aris began clearing the central workbench, his movements frantic but precise. "The regeneration is metabolically expensive. They're burning through their own biomass to heal. If we can block the key enzymes, the process collapses." Lyra stared at him for a moment, then nodded sharply. She began pulling jars from shelves, dried fungi that produced natural protease inhibitors, crushed seeds containing kinase blockers, distilled extracts of willow bark and monkshood. Aris set up the glass distillation apparatus, his hands moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 lab sessions in another life. The equipment was crude compared to what he'd used at the university: hand-blown glass, imperfect seals, a heat source from an open flame rather than precise electric heating, but it would work. As the first mixture began to bubble in the flask, Aris felt his cheat ability straining. Maintaining focus on both the biological processes outside and the chemical synthesis before him was like trying to solve 2 complex equations simultaneously. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The data streams flickered, encrypted commands from the viral system, regeneration markers on the zombies, chemical pathways in the distillation apparatus, all competing for his attention. "You're pushing too hard," Lyra warned, watching his pale face. "Even with your abilities, the mind has limits." "I just need to identify the primary catalyst," Aris muttered, more to himself than to her. His cheat showed him the molecular structure of the regeneration proteins, complex folded chains with active sites that bound specific substrates. One site in particular glowed brighter in his perception, a cleft in the protein that accepted a tyrosine derivative. "There. That's the bottleneck. If we can block that binding site." He rummaged through Lyra's ingredients until he found a jar labeled Shadowcap Extract. The fungus was toxic in large doses, but its metabolites were known to mimic tyrosine structurally while being biologically inert. Perfect for competitive inhibition. "Add this to the mixture," Aris instructed, measuring a precise amount with a graduated pipette. "And increase the heat. We need to force the reaction." Lyra adjusted the flame while Aris monitored the chemical process through his cheat ability. He could see the molecules interacting, the shadow cap compounds binding to the simulated active sites, blocking the real substrates. In theory, it should work. In practice, with medieval equipment and an evolving viral enemy. The distillation took 47 minutes by the water clock on the wall. 47 minutes during which the sounds of battle grew louder. Twice, runners came to report the situation deteriorating, the regenerating zombies were at the gates, and conventional weapons had little effect. Sir Kalen's voice could be heard shouting orders, then curses as something heavy struck the main gate. When the apparatus finally produced 3 vials of amber liquid, Aris's vision was swimming with overlapping data streams. He had to lean against the workbench to steady himself. The mental strain felt like a physical weight pressing behind his eyes. "Test it," Lyra said, handing him a syringe she'd adapted from a glass tube and plunger. But how? The prisoner, Aris remembered. In a cell beneath the keep, Stonehaven held a single captured zombie, one of the earlier, non-regenerating types, kept for study and restrained with iron chains. If this works on it, the principles should scale. The dungeon was damp and smelled of mildew and decay. The zombie in the cell didn't react as they entered, merely stared with milky eyes, its movements restricted by thick chains bolted to the stone wall. Aris approached cautiously, syringe in hand. His cheat ability showed the viral load in the creature, the infection markers, the corrupted neural pathways, the dormant regeneration sequences that hadn't yet been activated. "This will either work or make it worse," Aris said quietly. He injected the inhibitor cocktail into the zombie's arm, then stepped back. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the zombie began to convulse. Black fluid leaked from its eyes and mouth. The viral markers in Aris's perception flickered wildly, then began to dim. The regeneration sequences, previously dormant but present, dissolved like sugar in water. The zombie slumped against its chains, still animate but visibly weakened, the viral influence reduced to a background hum rather than a dominating presence. "It works," Lyra breathed. "You actually..." "It's not a cure," Aris corrected, his voice tight with exhaustion. "It's suppression. The inhibitor blocks the regeneration pathway and reduces viral replication, but it doesn't eliminate the infection. And it'll only work as long as the viral system doesn't evolve around it." He slumped against the dungeon wall, closing his eyes. The mental effort of maintaining his cheat ability through the analysis, synthesis, and testing had drained him completely. His head pounded with a migraine-like intensity, and his limbs felt heavy as lead. "We need to mass-produce this," Lyra was saying, already calculating quantities. "If we can treat the arrows, the bolts." Her words cut off as the dungeon door burst open. A young defender, a boy no older than 16, his face smeared with soot and blood, stumbled down the steps. "Messenger from the North Watchtower," he gasped, leaning against the doorway for support. "Scouts report, a horde. Thousands of them. All types, armored, regenerating, fast movers. They're converging from 3 directions." The boy met Aris's eyes, his expression one of pure terror. "The scout said they're not just attacking. They're surrounding us. Cutting off all escape routes." Lyra turned to Aris, her face pale in the torchlight. "Thousands?" Aris pushed himself upright, ignoring the wave of dizziness that followed. His cheat ability, strained as it was, showed him the truth in the boy's words, not through direct perception, but through the sudden surge in encrypted command traffic flowing through the viral system's network. Commands for coordination. For encirclement. For total annihilation. "The system isn't just adapting to me," Aris said, his voice hollow with realization. "It's decided I'm too dangerous to leave alive. This isn't another attack." He looked at the empty syringe in his hand, then at the weakened zombie in the cell. 3 vials of inhibitor. A settlement with dwindling supplies. Defenders already exhausted from fighting regenerating zombies. This is a siege designed to wipe us all out. And it's going to start before we can produce enough counteragent to matter. The sounds from above changed, not just the clash of weapons, but a deep, rhythmic pounding against the main gates. Dozens of impacts in synchronized waves. Then hundreds. Then more, until the very stones of the dungeon seemed to vibrate with the onslaught. Time, Aris thought with cold clarity, had just run out. The eastern sky bled crimson as dawn broke over Stonehaven, but the light brought no comfort. From the watchtower, Aris Thorne watched the viral system's data streams pulse like malevolent arteries across the landscape. Thousands of them. The glow wasn't visible to anyone else, just faint shimmering lines of corrupted data to his scientific perception, but it painted the valley in a latticework of infection that made his stomach clench. Thousands had been the scout's report. Now, seeing it, the word felt inadequate. Zombies moved in coordinated columns. Armored types with chitinous plates that gleamed dully in the morning light formed the vanguard. Behind them, the regenerators shambled with unsettling fluidity, their flesh visibly knitting and unknitting as they walked. The air carried the scent of decay and ozone, the latter, Aris knew, from the viral system's active transmission fields. "They're not just surrounding us," Lyra said beside him, her voice tight. The local alchemist had dark circles under her eyes from nights spent helping him prepare. "They're forming attack patterns. Like an army." "They are an army," Aris corrected softly. "One with a single commander." He could see the command streams now, encrypted data packets flowing from distant nodes to coordinate the siege. The viral system had learned from their previous encounters. The encryption keys shifted every 30 seconds, generated from success feedback loops Aris had identified in Chapter 9. He'd need to crack them in real time. Elder Mara's voice echoed from the courtyard below. "To your positions. Archers on the inner wall. Spearmen at the gates." The settlement leader moved among her people with grim determination, but Aris saw the fear in the set of her shoulders. Stonehaven's walls were stone and timber, sturdy against bandits, but against thousands of coordinated undead. Sir Kalen climbed the ladder to join them, his armor already dented from the previous day's skirmishes. "The east approach is weakest. They'll hit there first." The knight's skepticism had faded to grim acceptance. "Your device is ready." Aris nodded toward the 6 sound emitters mounted along the walls. Each was a crude resonator he and Lyra had built, copper coils wrapped around quartz crystals, powered by alchemical batteries. They emitted frequencies between 17 and 20 Hz, designed to disrupt the viral system's hive signals. "They'll work until the system adapts. Maybe 15 minutes per emitter before it learns to filter the noise." 15 minutes, Kalen repeated. "Better than nothing." Below, villagers scrambled to positions. Tomas, the peasant Aris had rescued weeks ago, helped drag barrels of boiling oil to the ramparts. Others prepared makeshift barricades from carts and furniture. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to taste. Then the first wave hit. Armored zombies surged forward in a silent charge. No war cries, no battle shouts, just the relentless shuffle of dead feet and the creak of unnatural joints. Aris activated the nearest sound emitter. The device hummed to life, emitting a low-frequency pulse at 18.5 Hz, the debug frequency he'd identified as most disruptive. Immediately, the data streams flickered. The armored zombies faltered, their coordination breaking as the hive signal fragmented. Some stumbled into each other, others veered off course. "Now!" Kalen shouted. Archers loosed volleys. Arrows thudded into chitinous plates, some finding gaps. The first line of zombies fell, but more pressed behind them. Aris watched the viral system's response in real time, new encryption keys generating, command packets rerouting around the disrupted frequencies. "It's adapting," he muttered. "Faster than before." Lyra handed him a clay dispenser, one of 20 they'd prepared overnight. Inside swirled the enzyme inhibitor they'd synthesized from shadowcap extract. "The countervirus," she said. "Airborne delivery. But we only have enough for 3 waves if we're lucky." Aris took the dispenser, his fingers tracing the crude trigger mechanism. The inhibitor would suppress viral replication and regeneration, but it required direct inhalation by the zombies. And the viral system would adapt to that too. He activated his cheat ability fully, letting the data streams flood his perception. Transmission pathways glowed like neon veins across the battlefield. Command nodes pulsed where armored zombies clustered. Regenerators showed as hot spots of rapid protein synthesis, biological processes he could almost see unfolding in real time. The mental strain was immediate. A headache blossomed behind his eyes, sharp and insistent. Maintaining this level of analysis while coordinating defenses felt like holding multiple complex equations in his head simultaneously. "Second wave incoming," a lookout shouted. Regenerators now, moving with that unsettling fluidity. Their flesh writhed as wounds closed almost instantly. Arrows that found their marks healed within seconds. The villagers' morale visibly wavered. Aris cracked the first encryption key, a 32-bit sequence generated from the armored zombie's initial success. He fed the cracked key into his transmitter, the device he and Lyra had built to broadcast phase-shifted false commands. The transmitter hummed, sending out corrupted data packets on all zombie frequencies. For a glorious moment, chaos reigned. A group of armored zombies turned on a cluster of regenerators, their chitinous claws tearing into flesh that tried to heal. Another faction veered away from the walls entirely, attacking zombies from a different approach vector. The viral system's perfect coordination shattered into infighting. Kalen seized the opportunity. Forward. Push them back. Defenders surged from the gates, taking advantage of the confusion. Spears found zombie throats, swords hacked at undead limbs. But Aris watched the data streams, seeing the system's response unfold. New encryption keys generated, 64-bit this time, more complex. The false commands began to fail. Time for the countervirus, Aris said. He aimed the clay dispenser at the thickest cluster of regenerators and pulled the trigger. A fine mist sprayed into the air, carrying the enzyme inhibitor. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Regenerators froze mid-stride. Their flesh stopped knitting. Wounds remained open, weeping black ichor. Some collapsed entirely as the viral replication processes halted. A swath of zombies fell silent and still. A cheer went up from the defenders. But Aris didn't join it. He was watching the viral system's data streams shift again, adapting to the inhibitor. New protein synthesis pathways activated in the remaining zombies, bypass enzymes that could work around the shadowcap extract suppression. It's evolving, he breathed. Already. Lyra handed him another dispenser. We have 19 left. Use them sparingly. For hours, the siege ground on. Wave after wave of zombies tested Stonehaven's defenses. Aris deployed sound emitters in rotating patterns, keeping the viral system off balance. He cracked encryption keys until his head throbbed with the effort, broadcasting false commands that turned zombie factions against each other in brief, violent bursts. Kalen's forces exploited every opening, but they were tiring. The settlement's defenders fought with desperate courage, but their numbers dwindled. By midday, half the sound emitters had failed, the viral system had adapted to their frequencies entirely. The countervirus dispensers were down to 8. Aris's mental reserves felt dangerously low, each new analysis requiring more focus than the last. He stood at the west wall now, watching a new formation approach. Armored zombies mixed with regenerators in perfect synergy, the system had learned to combine their strengths. Command streams flowed between them in encrypted bursts Aris struggled to crack. They're testing our weakest point, Kalen said, joining him. The knight's armor was splattered with ichor, his breathing labored. The south gate took heavy damage earlier. If they concentrate there. Aris nodded, already calculating. He activated his last functioning sound emitter at the south wall, but the frequency barely disrupted the new formation. The viral system had learned too well. Then he saw it, a command node pulsing with unusual intensity among the armored zombies. Not just a coordination point, but a core transmission node feeding data to the entire siege force. If he could hack that. Cover me, he told Kalen. Aris focused his cheat ability on the node, letting the data streams fill his vision until the physical world faded to peripheral noise. The encryption was complex, 128-bit keys generated from multiple success feedback loops. His mind worked through the algorithms, tracing patterns in the corrupted data. It felt like solving a differential equation while someone hammered on his skull. He cracked the first layer. Then the second. The mental strain became a physical pain, sharp behind his eyes. Blood trickled from his nose, he wiped it away absently, his focus never wavering. The third layer broke. Aris fed the cracked keys into his transmitter, broadcasting a new set of false commands. Not just phase-shifted packets, but corrupted data designed to overload the node itself. The effect was spectacular. The armored zombies around the node froze. Their chitinous plates cracked as internal systems overloaded. Data streams flickered and died. The formation's coordination shattered completely, zombies turning on each other in blind rage. But the victory cost him. Aris staggered, his vision swimming. The mental energy required had drained him to near empty. He leaned against the parapet, breathing hard. "You're bleeding," Lyra said, appearing at his side with a cloth. "It's fine," he managed, though nothing felt fine. His head pounded in time with his heartbeat. Then the viral system retaliated. Not with another wave of zombies, but with something new. From the center of the horde, a figure emerged. Tall, clad in black and plate armor that seemed to drink the light. It moved with unnatural grace, cutting through zombies that parted before it. In Aris's perception, this being glowed with viral system data streams so intense they nearly blinded him, a concentration of the plague's intelligence given physical form. "A corrupted knight," Lyra whispered, horror in her voice. The figure raised a sword that crackled with dark energy. With a single blow, it shattered the south gate's weakened timbers. Defenders who rushed to meet it fell in seconds, their weapons useless against armor that seemed to absorb strikes. The corrupted knight advanced into the courtyard, its gaze fixed on Aris. Through the din of battle, their eyes met. Aris felt the viral system's presence, cold, calculating, utterly alien, pressing against his mind. No offer of recruitment this time. Just elimination. Kalen moved to intercept, but the corrupted knight backhanded him aside with casual strength. The knight crashed into a barricade, armor denting. Lyra handed Aris the last countervirus dispenser. "We're out after this." He took it, his hands trembling from exhaustion. The dispenser felt too light. The inhibitor inside might slow the corrupted knight, but not stop it. Not permanently. The corrupted knight advanced, each step measured, deliberate. Zombies poured through the broken gate behind it, overwhelming the last defenders. The battle had reached its peak, and Stonehaven was losing. Aris raised the dispenser, knowing it wouldn't be enough. Knowing the viral system had finally manifested a weapon designed specifically to counter him. The mental fatigue made every thought sluggish, every calculation painful. Across the bloody courtyard, the corrupted knight leveled its sword at him. The message was clear: this ends now. And the countervirus supply was almost gone. The corrupted knight stood before Aris, its blackened plate armor glistening with a sickly, organic sheen in the fading daylight. Up close, the armor wasn't metal at all, it was chitinous growth, fused bone and hardened viral matter that pulsed with faint bioluminescent veins. Through the slits of its helmet, 2 points of crimson light burned where eyes should have been, fixed unwaveringly on the scientist. Aris's breath came in ragged gasps. His head throbbed with the strain of hours spent cracking encryption keys, adapting tactics, and maintaining the mental focus needed to perceive the viral system's data streams. The courtyard around them was chaos, the shattered remains of the south gate lay scattered, defenders shouted as they fought pockets of zombies that still pressed inward, and the air smelled of blood, smoke, and the acrid tang of his nearly depleted enzyme inhibitors. "You see the futility now, don't you?" The knight's voice wasn't sound, it resonated directly in Aris's mind, the same psychic communication the viral system had used before. Images flooded his consciousness, laboratories burning, microscopes shattering, equations dissolving into meaningless scribbles. A vision of his own hands, stained with ink and blood, trying to hold back an ocean of darkness with nothing but a beaker. Your science is a child's toy against the perfection of the network. Join us. Your mind could be so much more than this fragile, exhausted thing. Aris gritted his teeth, forcing the visions aside. His cheat ability activated almost reflexively, the world shifted, and he saw what others couldn't. The knight wasn't just a creature, it was a dense knot of data streams, a core transmission node in the viral system's local network. Thick cables of glowing information flowed from it to the surrounding zombies, coordinating their movements even now. But there were weaknesses, fracture points where the data streams intersected, places where the connection to the greater network was vulnerable. My science, Aris said aloud, his voice hoarse but steady, is about understanding systems. And you're just another system to debug. He took a step back, his boots crunching on debris. His mind raced through calculations even as his body screamed for rest. The enzyme inhibitors, what little remained, were in dispensers mounted on the walls, their reservoirs nearly empty. But he still had the concentrated dose he'd prepared as a last resort, sealed in a glass vial in his coat pocket. And he had the transmitter, still slung across his back, its components warm from hours of broadcasting false commands. The knight advanced, its movements unnaturally smooth. It raised a gauntlet hand, and the chitinous armor reshaped itself, extending into a blade-like protrusion that gleamed with a wet, organic sharpness. Then debug this, it whispered in his mind. Aris turned and ran, not away, but toward the western wall where Lyra had helped him set up the sound emitters earlier. His legs felt like lead, each step an effort of will. Behind him, he heard the knight's heavy footsteps, the sound of armor crushing stone and wood. Defenders tried to intercept, but a gesture from the knight sent viral tendrils lashing out, throwing them aside without breaking stride. As he ran, Aris's perception of the data stream showed him the knight's connection to the nearby zombies. They were still under its direct control, a personal guard of sorts. He needed to break that connection, create an opening. His fingers found the transmitter's controls by touch, adjusting frequencies even as he dodged a fallen timber. He reached the wall where 3 of his low-frequency sound devices were mounted. They were damaged, one had a cracked resonator, another had its power source nearly drained. But they might still work for what he needed. Aris slammed his hand against the activation rune Lyra had inscribed, pouring the last of his mental focus into overriding the damage protocols. The devices hummed to life, emitting a discordant 18.5 Hz frequency, the debug tone he'd used before. To normal ears, it was just a deep, uncomfortable vibration. But to Aris's cheat-enhanced perception, he saw the data streams from the knight to its zombie guard flicker and distort. The connection wavered. The knight hesitated, the crimson lights in its helmet dimming slightly. Clever, it thought at him. But temporary. Aris didn't wait. He sprinted toward a section of the courtyard where he'd earlier seen puddles of the enzyme inhibitor, spilled from a breached dispenser during the fighting. The liquid had pooled in depressions in the stone, shimmering with a faint blue luminescence from the shadow cap extract. It was diluted, weakened, but it might still have an effect. He skidded to a stop in the center of the largest puddle, turning to face the knight. "Come on then," he shouted, his voice raw. "Let's see how your perfect network handles a little contamination." The knight advanced into the puddle, its armored boots splashing through the inhibitor. Immediately, Aris saw the data streams flare with error signals. The knight's connection to the viral system flickered, not broken, but weakened. The chitinous armor lost some of its sheen, becoming duller, less responsive. "You cannot," the knight began, but Aris was already moving. His fingers flew over the transmitter, not broadcasting false commands this time, but something more precise. He targeted the data streams of the nearest zombies, a group of 6 armored types that had been advancing toward the breach in the gate. Using the last of his mental reserves, he hacked their command protocols, overriding the knight's control with a simple, brutal directive: attack the strongest viral signature nearby. The zombies turned as one, their movements jerky at first, then smoothing as Aris's hack took hold. They charged, not at the defenders, but at the corrupted knight. The knight whirled, its blade arm slicing through the first zombie with ease. But 2 more grabbed its limbs, their enhanced strength straining against the weakened armor. A third slammed into its back, teeth gnashing at the chitinous plates. For a moment, the knight was distracted, fighting off its own former guards. Aris didn't hesitate. He pulled the glass vial from his pocket, the concentrated dose of enzyme inhibitor, thick and glowing with intense blue light. He uncorked it with trembling hands and lunged forward. The knight saw him coming. It tore free from the zombies, sending one flying with a backhand blow. Its blade arm swept toward Aris in a killing arc. Aris dropped, sliding under the blow on the wet stone. The blade passed inches above his head, shearing through the air with a sound like tearing flesh. He came up inside the knight's guard, the vial held like a dagger. With all his remaining strength, he drove the glass into a fracture point in the armor, a place where the data streams showed the connection was most vulnerable, just below the knight's helmet. The vial shattered, and the concentrated inhibitor flooded into the knight's system. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The knight staggered back, a soundless scream echoing in Aris's mind. The crimson lights in its helmet flared, then began to flicker wildly. The chitinous armor cracked, fissures spreading across its surface like spiderwebs. From within, a sickly green light pulsed, then began to dim. Aris's cheat perception showed him what was happening at the data level. The inhibitor wasn't just suppressing viral replication, it was attacking the very structure of the transmission node. The knight's connection to the viral system frayed, then snapped. Data streams that had flowed into it now recoiled, retreating back toward the greater network. The knight's form began to dissolve. Not melting, but unraveling, the viral matter that composed it losing cohesion, breaking down into inert biomass. The armor flaked away like dried mud, revealing nothing beneath but a hollow shell that collapsed inward. The crimson lights winked out. As the knight dissolved into a pile of grayish sludge, something shifted in the air. Aris felt it, a pressure lifting, a constant background hum of the viral system's presence fading from the edges of his perception. Around the courtyard, the remaining zombies stopped moving in unison. Their coordinated attacks dissolved into confusion. Some turned on each other, others simply stood still, as if waiting for commands that would never come. The viral system's hold on the region had fractured. For a long moment, there was silence except for the crackle of distant fires and the ragged breathing of defenders. Then a cheer went up, tentative at first, then swelling as survivors realized the siege was breaking. The zombie horde, thousands strong just moments before, was dispersing. Without the knight's coordination and the viral system's direct control, they reverted to basic instincts, stumbling away from the settlement or attacking each other in mindless hunger. Kalen appeared at Aris's side, his armor dented and bloody but his sword still held ready. "Is it over?" the knight asked, his voice weary. Aris opened his mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The exhaustion he'd been holding at bay crashed over him like a physical weight. His legs buckled, and he would have fallen if Kalen hadn't caught him. As his vision blurred, Aris's cheat ability showed him one last thing: the viral system wasn't gone. It was retreating, yes, pulling its data streams back from the region, consolidating its forces elsewhere. But as it withdrew, it broadcast a final message, not just to him but to the entire network, a declaration that echoed in the empty spaces where its presence had been. This was but a test. The global network remains. We will evolve. The words hung in Aris's mind as darkness crept in at the edges of his consciousness. He saw the horizon beyond Stonehaven's walls, the distant hills where more threats undoubtedly waited. The viral system would adapt, learn from this defeat, come back stronger. His countervirus had bought time, not victory. As he slipped toward unconsciousness, cradled in Kalen's arms while settlers cheered their survival around him, one thought crystallized in Aris's fading awareness: he needed to find a permanent solution. Not just countermeasures and temporary hacks, but something that could dismantle the viral system entirely. The work wasn't over. It had only just begun.